Hi, be once again welcome to this channel. At the time of the Enlightenment, the philosopher Immanuel Kant played an important role in making religion something that concerns the inner being of each person, rather than mirroring the symbolic legitimation of the social order. This contributed in undermining the power of the clergy and the aristocracy, where there was the idea of the divine right of the kings. In his book, Religion Within the Limits of Reason Alone, Kant states that the moral law, which is within the human being, has primacy over the dominant figures of society, including the authority of the Church. Because of this, he was punished by the king of his country, Prussia. However, it was Kant's effort that gave us the lay state and religious freedom. Religion, as we understand it today in the Western civilization, dwells in this new context of the Enlightenment. Even so, for being an Enlightenment philosopher, Kant was considered as a destroyer of traditions. By the way, traditionalist movements are not fond of Kant. Due to the same reasons, today's far-right movements want society to return to a state of affairs where it was seen as natural that the supposed elite of society commands, and the common people simply obey. It does not matter that this elite belongs to this or that political party, or to an ideology of right or left. What matters is that there is a truth that is seen as unquestionable, and that truth takes primacy over the spontaneity of the human being. Supposedly, the individual must be under a law that does not come from himself or herself, for the truth, supposedly, belongs only to society. Kant, on the contrary, affirmed that this moral law lies within the human being and connected to God, being God a necessary postulate of reason. As Otto Rank also wrote, the moral law exists a priori within the individual and within the community. It's not imposed from the outside, since it is necessary for the survival of any human group. For this survival, there must be solidarity, mercy, and mutual respect. And that since prehistory. As one psychiatrist once told about prehistory, a great sense of loyalty was required in the groups of hunter-gatherers, so that they could help each other and survive. In this way of thinking, the barbarians, the beasts, that is, those who throw bombs at others, those are we. Regarding this kind of transformation that we had in the age of the Enlightenment, we must understand that our society of today also has its unquestionable truths, which are at the service of the elite and aim to disqualify the individual human being. Although, if in the times of French Revolution society pretended that these truths were endorsed by God, that is to say, by the institutional vision of God, today it is supposed that its legitimacy is validated by science. And that's not true, as science does not exist to validate an ideology. Science is always questioning, always going forward, looking for the answers to the problems that humanity faces, and bringing solutions in the way of technological achievements. But these technological advances cannot tell us about the meaning of life. In this sense, anthropologist Ernest Becker, following the ideas of the psychoanalyst Otto Rank, showed us how much our society tries to evade the question of meaning, which has to do with a theme that is fundamentally approached by religions. Whatever the religion, it's always necessary to become aware that someday the person will die. On this subject, Becker tells us that the child, when he or she asks about the body, is actually asking about meaning. That is, Where I come from? Where am I going? What am I doing here? The average adult, supposedly the normal adult, does not ask these questions. But we should not assume that the adult has solved this. Indeed, Becker tells us that the adult, plunged into the consumer society, has only developed defense mechanisms, denial and repression. So, when confronted with the problem of the meaning of life, he often makes use of irony and cynicism to avoid this question. And the culture of postmodernity is full of irony and cynicism to fuel these ego defense mechanisms. We need to understand that we all deal with the structures of power, and that these structures are not natural or neutral. In fact, we are all victims of them. And that cynicism and irony are also not neutral. They are an instrument of power, a kind of bullying. The ideologies of domination vary over time, although their mechanism is the same. If before there was oppression by means of religion, and then oppression by means of absolute ideologies like Nazism, could you think that in today's society there is no ideology? And wouldn't we be like the mediocre adult described by Becker, who only developed defense mechanisms to be functional in society, and perhaps using cynicism and irony to disqualify sincere questions about life and death from sincere people? Chances are that these people, who need more honest answers, are so because the superficiality of our society does not work for them. It does not provide answers for them. Usually people want to be competitive, able to reach the top of the social pyramid, able to rise in the hierarchy, strong and tough to win the competitions. Although all this provides unsatisfactory answers to the great questions of life. For example, both the rich and the poor will end equally in death, but people don't like to think about death. Therefore, in our society there is a lot of repression and a lot of denial. And people want to think that if they reach the top of the social pyramid, it's taken for granted that they will be happy. But the effect of this struggle will always be a crowd of financial outcasts, for whom the society of insane competition will always be cruel. Ernest Becker entered the history of ideas as the anthropologist who highlighted how our society avoids thinking about death. He was a pessimist, but in his own words, pessimism should not provide support for cynicism. He told us that we must never give up hope, and we must strive for a better world for our children. That would be a world of sincere people who seek a meaningful life, of good people believing in the value of each other and validating each other. As Becker wrote, it's always necessary to have an agreement in society, and this basic agreement is, quote, "Let us help one another in order to make possible the task of living," unquote. Before finishing, I would like to invite you to visit my scholarly site, with my articles and my book. Thank you for watching, please share this video and subscribe.